Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Rainbow Alley's virtual summer academy speaker. Today is the 11th of August. We are here with Kendra, our lovely ASL interpreter, and Franklin. Franklin, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of give us an intro of what we're going to be talking about.
Cool. So, hi, my name is Franklin Cruz, pronouns they, he. I am an artist here in Denver, Colorado. I am a spoken word artist, a dancer, and a general creative, but I'm also a scientist. So, I have a background in biology and ecology. I educate over at the Museum of Nature and Science. I'm also just like general community member helping to produce shows. I'm an Aztec dancer as well with Grupo Tlaloc. And then I also work with different organizations to connect Spanish-speaking communities and Black and Brown communities to the outdoor world for the outdoor experience in an inclusive manner to make sure that everyone feels safe and invited.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. So, is there anywhere that you would like to start with maybe talking about taking or incorporating Black and Brown people into nature, into science, into just the LGBT community as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, just like actually now feeling and vibing on the moment, I can kick off with the piece that kind of like shares a good introductory point for us to really
Hmm.
start as to who I am as a person. I think this poem has served me more than once in terms of really highlighting who I am in my whole identity so that everyone can kind of understand who you're talking to.
Okay.
So I'm always trying to remember where I come from and who I am because I'm a pretty eccentric person. But before this, I'm just trying to be my most professional self and utilize this wealth of knowledge I've collected. But before this, I'm just a busybody, always playing rhythms with my feet so that everywhere I go is a dance, singing a song so that my journey is a jam sesh. I am a soulful, big bone swing band. But before this, I'm just an hermano, preoccupied with my baby sister's laughter, making sure she's cackling Mexicana Milagrosa, happy baby brown girl, bubbly. I am a I am a queer, built of the sear bones and epitomes of Spartans, made or built of the sear bones and epitomes of Spartans who started wars only after they made love to each other. Because to them, a wife's kindness wasn't exactly battle ready, but a comrade's devotion sure as hell was legendary. But before this, I'm just the kitchen table inside of everyone's hearts. How we nourish each other with the food from the oven, shoving all the Sunday fun day into our belly. I love peanut butter and jelly because it's one of the closest memories I have of me and my nephew. And that sticky mash of summer cartoons. But before this, I am Latino. Explico that I'm a chico niño, still too young to understand why I can't be loud in Spanish, why I'm best tolerated in English, before people like Trump try to tell me that I'm a criminal. With all the will to demoralize the fabric of American values, setback told we plagiarize our identity. But he has never read my ancestors' codices. This, y'all, is how poison seeds get planted in both kids and me, and my parents, and the elders. We a whole forest of rock trees, hacked and uprooted, but before this I'm saluted for this flexible tongue, shown though when I talk bilingual, as if a single one language can explain why we still use race as a target. But let's go ahead and get far from this, to a time when we didn't have laws to obey that were meant to keep us enslaved, sovereign of the laws of white men who never intend to get off the podium, as pandemonium makes us forget how far we've come, because before this I was a Raramuri racist in my great-grandmother's maternal mountains. I was a Spanish paternal blood my great-grandfather released like the running of the bulls. But even before this, I was just Cro-Magnon, standing up against the whole mammoth, with nothing but my spear, my kin, believing we would win. But even before this, I was just Australopithecus. See how many of you can actually make sense of this? As a species, we stood up, lost our footing, always putting our feet in our mouths. Didn't we notice the sounds that we make? How racial slurs actually sound like a rattlesnake on the ground. Did you just ignore the caution to think before talking, to look before walking? Have we forgotten the caves we crawled in? Because before this, we were human prey. So instead, we prayed. We who know how to make good with our magic. Tragic how we forgot the gods within, how to turn pain and lust into faith and trust. We who burned all the Palo Santo wood. Because before this, we just withstood. What if this world to try to hurl at our face with this pace like it's trying to kill me and all of my siblings? But even before this, I know I was just God's tier, sent down right here. This is the language of turmoil. We who turn the soil in our poems to plant the seeds to make the oxygen we breathe. So before this, I am a wind mystic. Before this, I'm not going to give myself over to stories that ignore me. I have always been this big. I have always navigated myself, typhoon. I have not and will not forget that I've always been a monolith. So before this, I just had to tell you that I know the risk and the stakes of losing this. So I cradle this. Because before this, I'm just trying to understand where I come from, who I am for myself.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was
We're
lovely.
vibing today.
Wow.
So
I love that.
I think that's like a good starting point of being like, what do you want to talk about? All of that.
Right. Everything. All the things.
And I guess like this is a good starting point because you and I can have the conversation where others are just listening. But this is something that I always ask in my workshops and anything is, what did you just learn about me?
Yeah, it was a lot to take in. It was, just so much to like stop and really like listen to all of it. But I learned a lot that you are very proud of your roots and correct me if I'm wrong, but that you kind of have like Native as well as Hispanic roots, and you really connect to those, and you want to honor them, and honor every different part of your roots, honoring the part that's from the beginning of time to somewhere in like the Middle Ages, and then working all the way up until now. And so I think that's really inspiring to really connect with all of you, going as far back as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I also learned that you like to connect with people that are around you now, with like your little sister and her laughter and being in those happy moments.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, my connection is kind of like being a little wonky. Y'all still there?
Yeah, I'm still good.
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a lag. Just let me know if you can hear me okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'll continue even through the lag. I think the other ones too is I hope people got to notice that, I am a sibling, right? I'm also an uncle. I am also someone who just enjoyed sharing food with people, like the kitchen line. If you caught it, queer as all hell, all day my life.
I heard that.
Right. And so, and I think like, if I don't ever get to really dissect this poem with people, so I'm going to invite it here with you. Right. The line that I hope people catch on all the time is the line about the Spartans, and this, very, very hyper masculine society that is always seen as like the epitome of what masculinity should be. And it's so funny that like for the longest time, those qualities and traits of that have been used for the heteronormative side. But there's this entirely queer side to that story that has been erased. And so like, I hope that people are able to just understand that like, as much as these lines are fun and everything, they are loaded with like an invitation for resource and information. Like, oh wait, what did you just say about that Spartan line? Like, I didn't know that.
Right. And I think it definitely pushes people to, it gives them the platform to start learning more about things of all kinds, about, Native culture, Hispanic culture, all the different aspects of yourself. And then
right. Because I think the biggest thing I've learned, especially from that poem, is what identity really means and how for some parts it is chosen and other parts it is inherited.
Right.
But regardless of that, it is very unique, and it's like, how would I put this? Because it's this weird dichotomy of being special and not special, because culture in itself is not really that unique to one particular culture. Just because you're Venezuelan doesn't make you for some reason at a higher place than a Kenyan, at a higher place than a Filipino, than a higher place than a Samoan. Like everyone has culture. But I think if you can understand yours, it should give you a reference point to then relate to others without having to like appropriate, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just like, oh my God, what do I do here with this food? Oh, this is what we do? Okay, tight. And you can ask questions because you're just like, well, I know in my house, this is what we do. So I'm just trying to figure out what you do. And it's like a very tangible and like centric point to be like, I can start from me wherever you are. And then if you really get to those deep parts of yourself, you're like, okay, now I understand me, which means if I understand me, then I can understand you.
Right. You know, you kind of have to get yourself before you can get others, is what I'm hearing. And once you get yourself, you start to get others, you can share culture and you can share those moments and those good times and the good parts of things, while also being able to acknowledge that there are negatives that come with that culture or, that group.
Right. So I guess like this is a fun little part too. If I can ask just for some fun participation on your behalf, to just mirror like what from my story can you reflect upon and be like, me too?
Yeah, definitely the queer part. That's like an identity I really, really cling to for myself, and try to learn as much as I can about, as well as like I'm a sibling as well. I'm a middle child. And so I definitely understand, like, being with your siblings and having the good times, the bad times, all of it. As well, just how much your, I don't know, racial and ethnicity like play into your identities and how those have shaped you, because my race and ethnicity have been a very big part of my life, both positively and negatively. And so I like to take pride in it and I like to, you know, acknowledge everything about it and honor all of it and really like, trace it back and see and really think about all of history.
Mm-hmm. I have a really interesting thought then, because I know when, for me, like honoring my culture would look very different for you, and you honoring your culture. Because for me, like mine is really trying to, for one, honor the Hispanic side, because like even if it's the colonized side, I still have grandparents who like that is their culture, and it's this really hard understanding that like we can't fault the people who did not know better. Like it was just the
Right.
culture they were raised in. And so I had to go through a lot of work in my own lineage and then my own healing to be like, dang, like they were some, heteronormative, pretty ciscentric people who said some pretty messed up things to like all my queer
Right.
ancestors. All right, cool, cool, cool. But you know what? We're gonna learn Spanish regardless, because that was the tongue that grandma spoke, and it's still the
Right.
tongue my parents speak. And I wish I knew Nahuatl, and that's not even my indigenous lineage language. The indigenous language that belongs to my family is Raramuri, but
Mhm.
I don't have anyone connected here in the United States who speaks that. And then the closest family I have are thousands of miles away in Mexico.
Right.
And so it's just kind of like, okay, well, I can honor the Spanish lineage and that we can get close that way.
Yeah.
Aztec dancing is another way I do it, trying to read Spanish poets from all over Latin America, right? So then I was going to say, like, what are your practices that you have for like honoring your culture?
Yeah, and it's a little difficult for me, as I think a lot of African Americans experience this, is there isn't a lot of like history. Like I really can't trace a lot of my family. So like you said, like kind of dishonoring what I do have. Um, and I don't really do much to honor my culture. I try to integrate myself now more into specifically Black culture, because I was very ostracized from it growing up, and so trying to connect myself with people and just the Black community around me, as well as the Black queer community specifically, is something I really strive to do and work on, because I do feel like a lack of culture, and instead of trying to take someone else's or still feel lost, I'd rather try to connect with what I do have.
Yeah. Let
And
me
reading poetry from different art places and different people in that same group, I've been trying to like read and educate myself on all different kinds of Black perspectives throughout history.
nice. Oh, yeah, because I think like especially in these kinds of conversations, for one, I think people get a little scared about connecting to or even inquiring about other people's culture, and be like, okay, so like, what do you do? Like, and then comparing it to like the practices of another culture, and that's something that I also feel like I aim to kind of normalize a bit. Like, I don't think it's bad to have questions about people's culture. I think
Oh
there
yeah.
isn't a respectable way to like approach, and I think that's where like again understanding yourself, like the way you want people to ask about your culture, and especially if you have a culture that is in the minority, quote unquote, whether it's queer, whether it's like working class, whether it's racial identity, whether it's an
Right.
ability, whatever identity it is, I think anyone who comes from that sect knows what it's like to have a question come just like and rub them the wrong way. And so we
Yeah,
get trained especially on how to like not perpetuate that.
definitely.
And I think that's just something like whoever in whatever privilege you have, right? Whatever area, you know, I have certain privileges over other people, and things
Right.
like that. Being able to say like, okay, how would I like someone to ask me a question about this sensitive topic, you know?
Definitely.
And then also the grace of like, oh, if it's a mistake in good heart, right, then you're good, you know?
Yeah.
Because those won't perpetuate. If you make a mistake in good heart, they are like far in between, and then you're just like, okay, there's an exponential growing pattern to where you won't make
Right.
mistakes any further.
Yeah. I completely agree. I always tell people, especially with like trans issues, you know, be nice and ask your question, because even if you're not asking the right question, as long as you do it respectfully and with kindness as the intent, the person will perceive that most likely and be able to help you understand. And so I definitely understand of like, you know, you just have to be careful and aware of how you're asking questions about cultures or identities. But I feel like, you know, if more people did, we'd be able to talk about it more and talk about it in ways that are positive and not just, oh, this is a bad thing we need to talk about.
Mm-hmm. I've always like in the metaphorical sense, I always think about it like a being out in the wilderness, right? And like if you are not familiar with the wilderness, if you have been super like caught in a city and just aren't comfortable out there, you're going to be scared of going over hills, you're going to be scared of deer, you're going to be scared of all of these situations. But I think like we do put things in a box when we should exist in ecosystems. Like it's really, I understand why people put things in a box. It's a lot easier to think about that. But if you think about things like, okay, it's not that trans people are in a box over here and immigrants are in a box over there and people with like invisible illnesses are in a box over here. We are all in this mountainous hill and we're just walking around. But yes, you know, the people who are in this identity tend to be higher up on the mountain. They just like it where there's no trees. And then the
Right.
people who like have invisible illnesses, they like the trees because they just want to be by themselves. And it's just easier to like kick it back next to a tree and avoid people, right?
Right.
And then if you aren't familiar on how to move through those terrains and like go up an incline, cross a river, deal with the cold, if someone's in a cave because that's just their steeds, are you comfortable going in a cave or not? And then being like, okay, like, you know, these are the kinds of, for me, shifts where I start thinking about things in a more natural law sense of like, what are the analogs I can see in the outdoor world and then bring them here?
Right.
Because like it's so easy for everyone to be like, oh, you know, I'm just trying to avoid the bears and everything like that. But in all honesty, I'm more afraid of a deer in the wild than I am a bear. Because most, no lie, most bears are just like, oh, you know what? You're too much. Like I'm just looking for
Right.
trash and berries. Like this is a lot. But a deer is like, wait, are you here for me? Oh no, we're catching hooves right now. And like
Right.
they'll try to hit you. And it's just like, yeah, if you have this perspective of like, I'm afraid of this type of person or this type of individual because of yay reasons, you're going to be missing out on so many other things. You're going to have this perception where you're just like, dude, you're villainizing someone who doesn't need to be villainized, not catching the things that do need to be caught. And you're also
Right.
excluding yourself into environments where you're not even living an adaptable life.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, I think that trying to place people in boxes, and like you said, sometimes it is nice for the little human brain to just have things in nice boxes, but like when you really think about things, we are living in this ecosystem. That's what the world is. It's a large ecosystem that we all share, and separating it when we're supposed to work together is kind of counterproductive.
Because the one that it makes me think of as well is just like ecosystems. I think that's why I don't know if this is a true thing. I've observed this. It may not be a real thing, but I think queer people are very naturey folk as well. Like I don't know what if that's a true thing or not, but all the queer people I know love to go out into nature, right?
Yeah.
I think for one, it's an escape from a society that like doesn't necessarily feel the most inviting on a social context, but I think on a more spiritual context, especially if you're like very fluid in the spectrum and you
Right.
move or something like that, or you just understand that fluidity, like nature makes a lot of sense, right?
Definitely.
Like that ability to say like, okay, you have a body, not a gender. You have legs. There's this mountain. Let's go, right? And then being able to also understand that like, oh, here comes this deer or whatever, keep your distance and everything. Why? It's a deer. It's not even carnivorous because of these reasons, right? Like you're just aware that like, even though this thing isn't the most perceived threat, they can hurt you under these circumstances. You just have to be aware and read the moment. And like, these things are something that I feel like, especially as queer people, we're like, okay, who are you and how are you going to perceive me? Let me read this moment and then like judge my own safety and like move around that. Where I think a lot of privilege just kind of like honestly domesticates you in urban, like in a urban way, to where like you are removed from nature and you literally exist in cities alone. And that kind of lifestyle for me isn't necessarily good for your own well-being. Like even if you don't want to live out in the woods, like if you only live in a city, that's going to change the whole way you exist. And there has to be some part of you that at least like get some sunlight, some nature, some wind.
Right. Yeah, I feel the same way. That's one reason we love doing our summer academy, not virtually, because we try to take everybody camping and get people out of the city. And so it's so nice when you can be somewhere, like you said. I think as queer people, we like to be in nature because there isn't this, we don't feel the oppression as much. It feels a lot less, at least in my experience, because there is no sexism out in nature. There's no homophobia in nature. It's just nature. And so it's really nice as a queer person to go and not have those things. So I definitely hear what you're saying, and I do think it is a little bit of a gay thing.
I'm saying, like, the amount of times I go out and they're like, because, okay, you know, there's that whole thing, and it's kind of like wishy-washy about like telling and like, you know, being able to like clock a person and be like, oh yeah, you're queer, right? But like I enjoy it. I enjoy being able to go outside and be like, yes, look at all these queer folks outside. Oh God. Yeah. Because I think especially I found a lot of solace in like I remember being like 13 years old and finding this list of like the 1,500 species who are also gay. And I was like, let's go. Reading about penguins and lions and walruses and like all these animals. And I was just like, oh, that's so cool. And then honestly, that ended up validating a lot of like my internalized feelings. I'm like, oh yeah, like literally there are polyamorous relationships in nature. There are asexual relationships in nature. There's intersex. There is so many different of the LGBTQIA identities that people want to invalidate. And I'm like, let me find you an example in the animal kingdom. Let me find you 7 for each.
Right.
Because this is very natural.
It's so natural. Yeah, I definitely hear you.
Yeah. But I think it's a good opportunity to share another poem.
Definitely.
This one I share just because I'm in a good mood, and it's just like always a good poem to share for self-love. On the days you are your own worst enemy, laugh loud, even if you do sound like a hyena. Sometimes it feels like the world is rushing you to succeed, asking you to adult, as if anybody has any clear idea on how to actually adult. So when you still find yourself making less than the best choices, crack open a can of nostalgia. Laugh at your most socially awkward moments, like the time that I was actually caught naked in front of family. Remember that stress and the struggle? The mountain that as you got older somehow grew into a prairie dog hole. Be the kind of friend who's brave enough to jump in and strong enough to come out with you. Show yourself you love yourself enough to be unapologetically you, especially when the sirens and the riot shields come. The ones that arrive every single time you run out of money, hope, or the trust you sowed in a country. Be your own best friend who saw you hatch from the egg, grow wings, fly straight up into the sun, roast your own skin and fall. Be there when you are shish kebab by the prongs of fate and circumstance. Don't panic at your busted frame. Love yourself enough to rebuild yourself. Love yourself enough to parent yourself. Love yourself enough to get wild with yourself. Love yourself enough to get hyped with yourself. Love yourself enough to reenact X-Men with yourself. Love yourself enough to cook naked for yourself. Love yourself like you can love your heroes. Show them how you can grow wings over and over again. Love yourself like you love yourself. Wait, it's over and over again. Love yourself like you can love your family. Show them how you can grow wings over and over again. Love yourself like you can love your heroes, the ones who don't even know how great they are. Love yourself like you don't even know how great you are. Like everything that happens to you happens on purpose, and nothing was a mistake, not even the booby trap and the pitfall. Succeeding can be easy, But learning to love yourself along the way is why we need friends like ourselves. So be your own Justice League Unlimited. Soup into your own head or imagination and say all the stupid things you want. Hell, say them out loud and then back yourself up. Be the kind of friend who's okay with plotting out a theoretical crime spree. Be the kind of friend who's okay with busting out at a nightclub. Be the kind of friend who's okay with letting you crash out if you ever lose your house, or your heart, or your way. Allow yourself to germinate the way you're supposed to. Grow again like árboles de piñones. Water your own roots, trim your own branches, sculpt your own crown. Be the kind of friend you would end up marrying. The kind that would make you laugh over stupid things like waffles, and cry over nerdy things like Star Trek, and love you in all the right ways like forever wouldn't even be long enough. Love yourself like forever wouldn't even be long enough. Like even after you die, you would love your spirit wherever it ends up.
That was beautiful. I love that. I think that's really, really powerful, especially dive into so intersectional we have.
Sorry, I'm like
Against
lagging
us
a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me?
There it goes.
Hello. Okay. Do you want me to like start over, or did you hear some of that?
I heard a little bit.
Okay, I'll start over. It's fine. Okay, so I was just saying that I think it's a really powerful poem, and that I think it's really powerful because all of the identities that you have and that we share, it's so hard for them to be loved in not only in general, but in their moments of imperfection, because a lot of people only like to love identities when they're perfect and they never have issues. And so I think incorporating those moments of like goofiness and weakness, I think that was really important, really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, if y'all notice, like I've messed up poems twice already. You know, I am very much in what I call my human right now. And I think there's a bravery and like an honoring of yourself to just let yourself do that. You know, there is for me no longer a premise of professionalism that I operate under. Like you get me at my most human, and that is my most professional, because that is my most potent to make connections. That is my most potent to really represent people in a way where they feel seen and they feel like, oh my God, that is something I want to do, because other people did that for me. And I think it's just allowing in whatever way, like if you don't want to mess up on stage, you don't have to. But if you like forget to call back a friend and you're just like, oh no, it's okay. You know, we are like a forgetful person, and that's fine. We love ourselves, even though we are a little forgetful. And then allowing that kind of grace, or being like, oh man, I didn't get that like 100% on that test, but you know what? A 95 is really good. That is definitely above the 90th percentile. Congratulations, self. Like we did it, you know, whatever, however it shows up for you. But just recognizing when you give yourself grace for just being human.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I think especially marginalized communities put themselves on like hyper focus mode of their flaws because they live in this society that already tells them they're bad. And so they like sometimes overcompensate to be extra, extra perfect. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You can just exist as a human. You can just exist as a flawed human.
And I think that's honestly people who don't exist in that allowance of grace do get into like that cancel culture and that like really bad type of cancel culture, where I think there is a space for like if you are really, really toxic to the community and very, very harmful, then yeah, like sometimes you do have to be removed. But I feel like there is a lot of gray space where people just do not access, and saying like, you know what, you are flawed and we're not going to run from that, and you're not going to run from that, but also we got some time here to try to do this. And then after that, if it's just like, you know what, you're not addressing this, we might have to take this to the next level and like escalate from there, but also being able to de-escalate and be like, you know what, you are recognizing yourself and you are doing these things. That was messed up what you did before. Don't ever do that again. But tight. Let's continue moving forward.
Right. Being able to acknowledge people for their accomplishments and the good things that they provide, while also being able to criticize them without necessarily, you know, hating them or never being able to talk to anyone, but being able to just criticize them, I think is really important. And a lot of people don't really know how to do. And I feel like as a society, it would be a lot better if people could understand that it's possible to critique and also still care.
Yeah, it's like I think in the natural law sense, that is one of those things that I enjoy is all animals can operate with grace. Like literally a crocodile is known. So this is a cool thing on a nerdy sense. A lot of crocodiles and everything not only protect their nest the entire incubation period from predators because crocodile nests and alligator nests are like really easy to break into and the eggs are super nutritious. And so they're a high target. Moms will literally not eat for months and just protect that whole nest from anyone getting there. That's a level of maternity that most people don't know about those reptilians. Two, in order to get them safely to the water, the little babies start making this chirping noise to alert the mom that they're like ready. She digs them out, and then with those massive jaws that will crush you and I under no any circumstance, don't ever forget that. She gingerly picks them up into a pouch in her mouth and walks them down to the water and lets them go so to ensure that all her babies make it to the water, right? And so it's just this thing for me where it's just kind of like, okay, in those moments where you feel super reptilian, like you're about to just rip something up and everything like that, you're just like in this like what we would perceive gruesome, just cold-blooded self. Remember these other elements of this, right? It's that whole thing about like the deer who like you would see a deer and be like, oh, Bambi. Little do you know, Bambi's got horns and will ram them through you.
Mm-hmm.
Or antlers, to be specific.
Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that humans are so multifaceted, and not even just humans. Everything has so many sides, and to try and narrow something down to just one of its sides or part of its sides is really neglecting a whole being, a whole entity.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think it's if for me, I find it almost a little insulting when people don't even allow themselves to access their full emotions, because I'm like, do you not know how powerful you are? Like, I know this is a very difficult and angry conversation or heavy conversation or awkward conversation or whatever you want to say. But in order to, for me, I feel really navigate those spaces requires you to evolve in a way where, for the most part, I will say there are emotionally abusive and just abusive situations that you should just get out of. But most of those difficult conversations are ones that you will survive. There, you might have to break up with a friend, you might have to break up with a partner, you might have to set a boundary, you might have to have a difficult conversation with someone. But yes, again, like the large swath of them, I feel are just difficult, annoying. But if you level up in them and know how to like navigate through your anger, and for me, like, have you ever read Care of the Soul?
I have not, no.
Oh, highly recommend everyone on here to read Care of the Soul. It is a wonderful book. I'm blanking on the name of the author, but I can look it up in a second. I just don't want to swipe away from my screen. But it taught me like the meaning of quote unquote negative emotions, your anger, your guilt, your jealousy, as some of the most profound teachers you will ever have, because they are. Have you seen Inside Out?
Yeah.
Perfect. Care of the Soul is essentially Inside Out, but just way more academic. And so in that same way that we had to learn that sadness had a purpose in life, that it was just part of life and you shouldn't run from it. And there's actually this profound evolution when like we get to that point of the movie. Spoilers for everyone. I'm so sorry. But there's like purpose in them. And so for me, like my anger justifies me when I know it's constructive to my purpose. Right? If I'm angry and it's fueling my purpose and it's really getting me to a constructive and successful area, then use those angers. But if my anger is destroying people, making the toxic environment for myself and others, or moving me away from my goal, that's not good anger. The same thing with like your jealousy and everything like that. Jealousy, for the way it was reflected, is like this alert that you still have ambition. And that jealousy is that friend that taps you on the shoulder that's just like, oh, you want that? Oh, because we want things for our life. Because you want good things for you. Because we like us. Right? And just like this way to reframe a lot of these emotions. So like that poem is definitely born, and this perspective is born from like reading that book too. And just being able to say, my life in all of its forms, even when it seems the most difficult, is the blessing.
Right. I think that's great. Yeah. I would definitely agree. I think, people get so overwhelmed with emotions and they try to run from them. And like how you said, like emotions have purpose most of the time. And if you're really checking in with yourself and being honest with yourself and listening to your honest emotions, you'll be pushing yourself towards your goal where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I like to make sure that I can be very sensitive. I know I take things very personally, and so I try to like take some time when I get upset to like make sure, am I really upset, or was it just something that I maybe took the wrong way? And usually when I do that, I find, yeah, this was something that was actually upsetting me. I need to address this, or I find this was something that I might be able to just let slide. It's not really that big of a deal to me, and that I don't need to address it. And I think having that internal dialogue with yourself before you go out with and have dialogues with others is really important.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, because I love to dance, so my somatic and like body experience is super important to me. Like what I feel inside is very driving to how I act in the world because I've trained my body to feel that. But I think that's something that dancers do because it is a calling to us, but I don't think everyone else does. And I don't think people live in their bodies as much. So I do want to take this moment to even invite everyone to like, what I mean when I say live in your body is at any given moment, I know every single feeling from my heel to my neck. And even if it's aching, even if it's tension, even if it's something, I want to be aware of it. I want to work on
Right.
my alignment and I want to know that I'm holding my body in the most like suspended and aligned way to where I'm not hunching over, I'm not doing anything. I'm just perfectly stacked upon my bones, essentially, to where I don't
Right.
have to really use any effort to like hold myself up, or I have to use less effort to hold myself up that way. And my blood will flow better, my oxygen will flow better, my attention will be more there. And then if you can evolve that to be like, oh, what is that tickle in my stomach? Is that excitement, anxiousness, hunger, like thirst, and being able to delineate those feelings? And then even taking it from there is like, oh, this is anxiousness. Okay, what am I anxious about? And then being able to trace it and be like, oh, I got anxious because Nevaeh walked into the room and we have to have a difficult conversation about this, this, and that. That's what that was. Got you. And then you're able to like really understand yourself on a personal level, and not only do that, navigate your space and be like, is this a conversation I'm ready to have with Nevaeh? Like you said, nope, cool. I'm not going to talk to them. I got to get out of this room for a quick second and like go ground myself so I can get ready to have this conversation. If this conversation is something I need to have, will it like progress our situation forward? No, then maybe I have to have a different conversation with Nevaeh. But that all takes a moment of just like, what was that feeling in my stomach?
Yeah, and being in tune with yourself physically, like you said, it leads to being in being connected with your emotions. Because if you know what's going on normally with your body, you'll know when something's up. So I think that's definitely a great tip to give everyone.
Yeah, and I think like even for I'm gonna take this off. It's bothering me. Even I think even for people who don't know how to begin. So like number one is body scans, which is just literally bringing your attention to things. So like it's as easy as being like, okay, bring my attention to the top of my head and literally forget the feeling of your toes, your knees, your hips, and everything, and like 100% of your focus comes up here. And you close your eyes and you literally just try to feel from that point. And then you move that point all around your body. You say, focus on the left eyebrow, the right eyebrow, the like right nostril, the left nostril, and then the breathing. Because I think people forget that breathing is the vehicle for life. Our whole metabolism is being fueled by oxygen, right? Like it's just that free energy giving element that's just like giving us the kick that we need to start our processes. And so if you're not really using the full capacity and like, I think people don't even know, like, what does it feel to use the full capacity? Can you feel your chest rise and fall? If you don't feel like your ribs move a little bit, like, are you really breathing? And especially those who bind, like, this is a safety tip for those who bind too.
Right.
Like, even if you bind, like, give your ribs space to move. Like, you don't want to restrict your lungs in that as well. So, like, that's where that safe binding technique comes from. Because imagine if, like, just on a, again, on a trying to fit into the world sense, you constricted yourself to the point that you like deregulated your own breath and stripped away your own body from yourself. Like at that point, I know it's really hard, but try to forget what the world does. Practice a more proper breathing technique, because more than trying to fit in there, you want to fit in here. right?
Right.
You want to know how
Definitely.
you feel so that like if you meet that cute person, you know, you're not like, what is this anxiousness? Oh God. And you're just like, maybe it's because you're also not getting your full breath. So like, you know, how are you going to talk to
Right.
the cute person if you can't even breathe?
Exactly. Yeah, binding is definitely something that I see a lot of people do unsafely because of society. Because, and I've been a victim of it too. I once double binded because I just wanted to be flat. I wanted to look a certain way, and after I took it off, I was like, I can't feel my ribs. Like, it was really bad, and it wasn't safe, and I didn't even feel comfortable when I was binding, and so I gave up the comfort of my own body to not even feel seen or validated by society anyways. And so even though it is hard having to like say, okay, I don't really care what society thinks, I need to make sure that I'm okay and as physically safe and healthy as I can be.
Yeah, and I think this is where the whole running back to like understanding yourself and your culture and everything like that, like, you know, I do believe Western clothes is very binary and gendered, but if you peel back and go to different, like your cultures, so many cultures already recognize many different genders. And if you look at the fashion from back then, there's like gender appropriate clothes for even them. So there's
Right.
ways to dress your body. And I think a lot of it is we just have to step out of that Western notion of how the body's supposed to look, how the body's supposed to be dressed, what it's supposed to like appear like. And it's going to be so liberating. You know, I remember one of the first things I did that got me misgendered, which is so weird, was literally just growing out my hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just from behind, people started changing pronouns from like in front of me, and I was just like, really, it's not even that much, yo, like
Right.
the rest of me is still very mass presenting, come on. um
Right.
but it's these things where it's just like, this is so westernized as feminine, but in all indigenous cultures and in so many cultures, this literally does not gender anyone. um
Right.
and like, and on top of that, even if you have long hair, it's more of a status symbol than it is like a marker, right? Like, oh dang, you got your curls popping, that means you can treat your hair, right? You know,
Right.
it's a whole different ball game. But it was so interesting to me, this. And then like earrings, when I started wearing skirts, when I dance, like my femininity definitely comes out a lot more. And you just
Mm-hmm.
see like legit all the heteronormative guys primarily scoot away from me, because I'm over here moving my body in all kinds of rhythmic ways. And there's this like, for me, this is what I perceive. Don't know if it's for real, but I feel like it is. You can see this discomfort in them at what I'm doing with my masculinity in public. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, wait, that can happen? Oh,
Right.
oh, no, I can't that. So deuces.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, later. Like, you know, I'm just existing in
Literally,
my
bye.
happiness. Um, and so like being able to equip yourself in those ways, if it's a matter of like binding yourself differently so that you can still breathe and present the way that you are, is it wearing clothes that aren't so centric to a culture that doesn't really support binaries to begin with? You know, is
Right.
it peeling back and looking for like, okay, how do my people present? And if you don't know your people, like there are the futurists, right? You don't even have to go back. Now there's people who are going
Right.
straight forward. You could be like, oh, tight, like I'm just gonna wear oversized like jackets that are vinyl and made from like reuse this, and tight, let's go.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, it's if you if your culture maybe wasn't the most like non-gendered or and you want that, make your own. Make a new culture that is based in being beyond the Western gender binary and just being. I think that I've kind of seen that actually. A lot of young people are, trying to degender things and trying to just make being a thing again.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Lakota phrase, 7 generations forward, 7 generations back.
Mhm.
I think this is speaking a lot to that. You know, I think because of the colonization and destruction of like non-Western, non-Eurocentric cultures, and that loss of information, we just
Mhm.
knew of the legends and the histories through like stories and tales, but never had the like concrete like information anymore, the evidence of it.
Right.
Um, other than the ones who lived and were just like literally hiding it in their like houses and in their brains and like just
Right.
surviving it until now. And now that we are accessing that information and like permeating that again, I think it's inspired this new wave, like you said, amongst the youth to create this new world, because for one, it's super hard to even try to recreate the old world. Like, that information is
Right.
so gone. Two, is it necessary for us to do that? Like, shouldn't we want to create our own world and like create our own spaces? Because, you know, if we recreate the old world, there's a whole bunch of new systems that won't work in that old world anymore, right?
Right.
Like, our technology just won't work in that world anymore. So if we do try to like indigenize and go straight back, it's not doing us any favors when we should be going forward.
And I think, you know, how do we also make sure that we're not making the same mistakes of past cultures, and while integrating the new things if we're trying to go back? Because, you know, history, humans are meant to make mistakes, how we've talked about, and they're allowed to move through with grace. And so there were mistakes back then that might not work now. And so how do we make sure that we're incorporating everyone and making everything as, or trying our best to make everything as best we can to benefit everyone in this, if we're going to make a new culture, a new, you know, way of life?
I guess this is a fun question to pose. This popped into my head. How do we send memory forward?
Definitely.
Right. Because yeah, go ahead. What do you think of when you hear that?
Yeah, it kind of, like you said, like the, you know, there are people like moving toward the future. It kind of makes me think of that like whole Afrofuturism, indigenous futurism of like taking what we know and what we've had and, you know, what we're left with, and incorporating it into what we build and making it into something so much bigger than it was before. Like the memory part, you know, kind of incorporates the looking back as, and then, you know, taking it forward of adding in the new elements.
Because like, I know goals of mine, like when I was a little kid, I was like, it'd be a dream if every state in the United States would completely convert 1/3 of all of its lands into national wildlife parks. Like, if we did that, the United States would be at the forefront of conservation everywhere. And mind you, there would still be enough land to house, feed, and produce everything that we needed. We would just have to actually do it intelligently, you know? Like, this whole mass surplus of food that is completely wasted because of just this really ridiculous system of consumption and food waste that we have, and like no composting, and just like the agricultural industry and its ridiculous pretty much being left in negligence. But like, people are like, I still need a butt ton of food. It's like, but you're not necessarily helping us or making it easier to grow this food. You just want me to make a ridiculous amount of food with these like systems. Oh dear Lord, I lost my train of thought. Help me out real quick. I got really caught up.
Talking about the how there's like a surplus of food, and how that has really like made this really bad system that the agriculture industry is.
Right, but where was I going with that? Man, that brain fart just
We're talking about the memory to the future.
That's what it was. Okay, so with this memory, the whole point about it, in our dreaming, which is where that whole thing, because that was a little tangent of mine, if that dream ever came into fruition, the things that would have to happen, like, for one, we do need to like destabilize capitalism, because capitalism is where we get this scarcity mentality where we do not have enough to achieve this. But if we look at capitalism, there is more than enough available to everyone for everyone to live an adequately sourced lifestyle. Like, and I think we have to eliminate the idea of like that, because once we eliminate capitalism, we eliminate classes, and honestly, we eliminate resource exhaustion, because people aren't fighting over lands anymore. And it's not a matter of like, I own this much land, you own this like little parcel of land, and like on top of that, your little parcel of land is housing like 500 people, while my 1,000,000-acre land is housing one person, type of thing. Like, that wouldn't happen. In the same way of like potable water being taken, in the same way of like literally killing thousands and hundreds of chickens and cows every year, because we're just like, but then that meat gets thrown to waste. It's like, why don't you actually just have small farms? Everyone saves up, because yes, it costs $2,000 to raise a cow. So yes, the whole farm or the whole community will toss in $2,000, pay the butcher. But then look at that, the whole cow is eaten. Only one cow got killed, not 10,000. Everyone has meat for the next 3 weeks, and you paid about the same. Everyone just came in and we did it a little differently. Like, these
Right.
are the types of shifts that have to happen. Like, you know, not gendering your child until like we come out. Like, that would be as simple as changing a policy to remove gender markers off of birth certificates. That could happen tomorrow. Like, these things are
Right.
so accessible to us. And it's just a matter of like, honestly, like right now with Black Lives Matter and everything, we're seeing how it's a proof of concept that if the nation can get behind a single like source, a single door, a single movement, you can actually get things to change. Like in Colorado, I do believe qualified immunity for police officers is gone.
Yeah.
And so like that was in this year.
And it happened very quickly after there was, you know, cause for it. And once people were really listening and, you know, actually trying to do things, a lot happened. But I feel like a lot of people let that momentum go. And so now we're kind of at this place of, well, there was some change, let's continue it. And like you said, if we really put the people power behind it, we could get anything done. We could get gender markers removed. We could have small farms be accessible to everyone. We could have housing be accessible for everyone. But until capitalism is gone, there are always going to be people, there are going to be capitalists who want the system that only works for some to continue because it works for them and they don't really care.
And this is where like even in myself, I have to ground myself into that natural law thing again. It's, if you think of microbiology, a generation in microbiology is 2 hours. That's about how long it takes for a whole bacterial generation to like pretty much live, die, and the next generation to completely take over, right? But the thing that we always have to remind yourself in the microbiological sense is because they're so tiny, that's why they get a 2 hour generation. So once you get into the complexity of us, which is a multi-trillion cell organism, right? We still operate under microbiological tendencies. So like cultures, we have bacterial cultures in microbiology, right? To grow a culture is as difficult as to make a real culture in like humans, right? The only difference is because of the generational difference, it's a lot easier to like change that culture for bacteria because it's 2 hours versus us. Like a generation for us is about 70 years, right?
Exactly.
And so like we are seeing the effects now of what happened in the 60s, of what happened in the 50s. Like this is the culmination of that, right? And so what we lay down, again, 7 generations forward, all of that is for the next 7 generations so they can persist in the work. Mind you, we're making catapult leaps right now, which is going to make their lives a lot easier.
Yeah, we're shaking things up, making it hard for people who want to make life harder for us. But I think that, like you said, the impact of changing a culture is easier for bacteria because they are so much smaller, and beyond being multi-trillion cell organisms, we also have, everybody has different upbringings and ideas and free will and all of that. So it's an extra layer of difficulty when trying to change the culture. And like you said, we're seeing the effects of the 60s now, as well as making these changes current day. And so seeing what that's going to be like down the road is going to be really interesting because of all these different ideas and cultures and upbringings working together to make these changes.
Yeah. I have another poem, but this one is written down.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to share this one because I think like, especially with what we're talking about and all of that, I wanted to just ground it in some gratitude because like regardless of how crappy the situation is right now, you know, I'm very much, I know that I am living in one of the most blessed times, regardless of what's going on, you know? So this is one that I wrote a while ago. It's on another gratitude note. I'm grateful. Like both my parents are alive and pulling pranks. All the kids got kids except for the queer ones, and everyone is chill with being patient for us. We know not all families are like this one. I'm grateful because claws and teeth no longer frighten me. Even on uncertainty or on challenge, treachery itself could show me all its fangs, and I'll still know that this too will pass. I am grateful for this king's share of divinity. Whatever snarling creature walks ahead of me, I know the rhythm of the blind prophet, and ease my hand onto this unwary soul. It may wildly swipe at me, and I will calmly know how to brace myself. Meeting our demons calls for blood, and so does healing. I am grateful for all my blood, all of it, how it swells with breath. I am grateful, how it calls my lineage. I am grateful. My blood is pulverized temple stone. I breathe in legacy and diffuse it through my heart. I am grateful for all my mistakes. The puzzle piece I forgot, casually making a comeback. Grateful for the bruise, break, heave. Grateful because I am human and pain is memory. And I do remember well that lesson. I am grateful for steps, for my creator being considerate enough to prepare me, for taking the process of precaution and providence. I'm grateful for every moment meant for me. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's really important to honor the positives of times now as well as just life in general. I really like the line about how your creator took time to make you. I thought that was really beautiful. I like that line.
No, yeah. I think especially in this moment, it's very easy to be like faithless. And I think when you're operating with faith, you don't necessarily have to operate in the sense of like religious or spiritual faith. If you do, awesome. Like I pertain to one, so like I'm not denouncing them at all. But even having faith in like yourself, even having faith in luck, even having faith in whatever. But I think to especially to exist in this world and to operate without some source of or fountain of faith, it's just not healthy for oneself either. Like if you can't even look at the sky and be like, the sun will come up tomorrow for sure, and feel some
Right.
kind of like inspiration from that. Those are those mental health marks of being like, oh, I need to like talk to someone. I need to take a walk. I need to write a poem. I need to like work out.
Right. Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I'm not super spiritual, but like finding a source of faith is really important. And like you said, how you even if it's just, oh, the sun will come up tomorrow, I'll wake up tomorrow, I have something to look forward to. It really pushes you, and to not have that, I think, is what makes people feel so alone, because faith to me is at least having something, someone usually. And so, when you feel faithless, you feel alone. And humans are very, very social creatures. They like to be around others, they need others. And so I definitely hear what you're saying.
Yeah, because like even when like I've gone out into the field to do like bird research and things like that with professors and whatnot, and it's really interesting this like seeing even nature operate with faith. You know, there's a level of faith when birds leave the nest and they leave their like chicklings alone or their eggs alone. That the camouflage in their eggs will work. That that they are going to be gone and back in time. That they've chosen a nest location that is prime. That they're nothing's gonna mess with them. Hummingbirds, they bet on the fact that they can make a tiny freaking nest that no one's ever gonna find. Eagles, they bet on the fact that they're an eagle, so try to get into their nest. Like that's just the
Right.
dumbest decision you'll ever make. And so it's just all these times where like gazelles who they're being chased and put faith into their legs and just stomp and run with all their might. There's just this at whatever level of faith, accessibility, right? Like even if you don't want to put faith in yourself, there's even ways to put faith in others. And like, I always warn about not having faith in yourself first. I feel like everyone should have faith in themselves first. But if that's not in the cards for you, then find the people to put faith in and follow that, follow them. People who like, what, for whatever reason, Nevaeh, they got it. They got it. I'll follow Nevaeh until the end of time, just because like I trust them. They've shown me that they're a quality person, and sometimes I make the worst decisions. So I can't necessarily trust myself at this moment. Let me just learn from Nevaeh.
Right.
And then having those I think accessibility is because, like, I come from a community where, yes, I completely understand not everyone has the community I have. I've been in the community for 10 plus years now. I have not only grown up in the community, but I've given back to the community. So my role is very integrated at this point. And I know for some people, they just don't have access to that. Small towns, bad community, you just don't feel like you're up for it or whatever reason.
Right.
I would say at least try to have one or two friends, pen pal at least,
Yeah.
or at least one to two outlets if you don't.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one great thing about the internet is it has been able to connect so many people and made like
Yes.
internet communities now, people who would never otherwise meet
Yeah.
or talk. And I know especially for the queer community, it's been really beneficial for people who can't always be out or be their true authentic selves all the time. They have, somewhere to go.
Yeah, and especially like with YouTube at this point, YouTube itself is both it's a church, it's a university, it's a club, it's a
Right.
concert, it's a poetry slam, it's a whatever you want it to be. And with libraries still free access, like you can still go up into a library and connect to YouTube and listen to an inspirational speaker, listen to a preacher, listen to a poem, find you a good song that really centers yourself and like clears your heart out for you.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So could you maybe talk more about the work you do with connecting Black and Brown communities or BIPOC communities in nature? Because I think that a lot of people kind of neglect themselves from nature.
Yeah, so for one, just like on a resource tip for everyone, these are a couple of communities that are aimed at connecting either Spanish-speaking brown or Black communities into nature. The one I work with is called Promotores Verdes. They work out here in Commerce City, and they literally stand for green stewards, green promoters, and work on restoration projects, especially out here with the Rocky Mountain Arsenal Refuge over in Montbello. We were just out there doing some lake restorations. We were cutting and transplanting willow shoots so that the little trout and pike, well, no, not, it was bass and pike. Those are the two fishes. So the little fishes could have a place to go, like rest and hide in the reeds so birds won't eat them and they could actually grow up. So we were doing that. But other groups I work with as well is I just did one with Latinos Outdoors. They are a national organization, but I work with the Colorado chapter over here. They'll work with places like the Bluff Lake Nature Center that's over in Stapleton. Elk is another one too, environmental learning for kids. That's another great one for people, especially they have a base out here in Montbello that they work out with, and they just set up this new open nature site in the heart of Montbello, right behind the old Montbello Park and Ride. Who else is out here? There's Girls Trek. Girls Trek is a national organization specifically for Black girls to get out into the world. Who else is out here? And like literally, I could just connect you forever and ever and ever. I think
Right.
the aim of all of them is no lie, like the outdoor world, like everything else, is a microcosm of what we see. So white supremacy is out there, this idea of camping being expensive because you need to buy the tent, you need to buy the sleeping bag, you need to buy
Right.
the lantern, you need to buy this, you need to get the camping permits, you need to get if you go to a national park, some national parks want you to pay a fee, right? And then when you get out there, if you don't have the nicest stuff, then you don't necessarily feel like you're in the right place because look at their camper, look at their tent, look at this, look at that. And then if you want to do like if you want to play loud Mexican music and you're just like, oh, I think they're giving us weird looks out here because, it's just
Right.
not the most inviting community and it's not the most accessible, then yes, it becomes this thing where like we have to make an effort to create space. So one of the things I do is, for one, a lot of the programs I do are either bilingually centric or Spanish centric, just personally, because that's just where I come from. But also we do a lot of acknowledging of indigenous lands and bringing in communities from indigenous tribes locally, from the Lakota Ute tribes at least, to just talk to people about like what the lands or who belonged to the lands first, their traditions and their ways and where they are now, so that our communities, because they are colonized as well. Mexicans are very much disconnected from their indigeneity, like a lot of other people, to remind them, like, hey, these roots exist, and like it is our job to go back because they're our roots. But then, in that sense, also doing basic stuff like how to set up a tent, how to be aware of fire bans, and also in situations where fires are okay, how to do fires correctly and safely, and how to put them out. Bear safety, deer safety, plant safety, because there is poison oaks and things and stuff out there, so how to recognize that. But then on top of that, we'll just do like forestry stuff. So if people want to like really get into that field, we do partnerships with the National Wildlife Federation. We do partnerships with the National Forestry Service, and we'll bring people out to do these workshops and everything to be like, oh, this is how you count plant density and plant biodiversity in alpine forests and things like that. And we'll take people out and train them on how to do that. That way, in case Nevaeh really just wants to be an ecologist in their like near life, you now have some friends and you can be like, oh, dang, I remember that one time I had to go count tree swallows because we were trying to see the population density of tree swallows in this place. Tight. I like can put that on a resume. And if you're just like, nah, that's not my business, at least we figured that out for you.
Right. And you learn something new. And it's, you never know. You might be stuck in the woods one day or something. It's good to know.
Yeah. And then especially like, even recalling to the other poem, like humans have been domesticated for a short period of time. For the most part, we existed the majority of our species life in the wild. There are things in your body that respond to the natural signals of the world. I don't know if you drive. Do you drive?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I don't know if this has happened to you, but especially at sunset, when you're driving and the red of all the brake lights hits you, do you start to get tired?
Yeah, a little.
That's actually a thing, because the only time red like that would show out was in the sun was setting, and it would trigger the melatonin production in your brain, and melatonin starts to put you to sleep. So the reason a lot of people start to get dozy when they're going home in the afternoon is because they're staring at a bunch of brake lights that are all red, and so it kind of tricks your brain into start producing melatonin.
Wow, I did not know that.
It doesn't happen to like everyone, but it can happen, and it's just like oh, I didn't know. But it's just like natural sunset, natural red light in the sky, plus all the extra red light of the brakes just gets it going.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do you know about tree bathing?
No, I haven't. No.
So here's another one. If you are ever actually anxious and you cannot afford to go to a therapist, get yourself to nature. It is scientifically proven that if you walk slowly, like very like methodically, not saying a single word, in trees for 10 minutes, it lowers your blood pressure. It actually helps to alleviate stress in your body. It starts to produce a calming like euphoria within you. And if you do it for at least an hour, it is pretty equivalent to just like de-stressing yourself.
Wow, that's really helpful.
And like these are the type of things we try to tell people, where it's just a matter of literally using nature to heal you, especially if you do not have access to mental health therapists or anyone like that. Nature is one of your best ones. Literally go cry at a lake. But then also like food justice too, and like feeding yourself in a way that also promotes your own well-being.
Right.
So like and I know these are little cheat sheets that we tell people. Eat red stuff for like your cardiovascular health, eat yellow and orange for your immunity, eat green stuff for your digestive health. The other one we also tell people is like eat foods that look like your organs. So celery looks like your bones, cauliflower looks like your bones, broccoli and cauliflower also look like your neurons in your brain. Carrots look like your eyeballs when you cut them. Like there's all these analogs, because literally these things are meant to work with our body.
Right.
And so many people are like, oh, well, like what's purple? Like what kind of foods are purple? I'm like, what are you talking? Eggplant, beets. Let's talk about red cabbage. Let's talk about red kale. Let's talk about all these foods. And they're like, oh, like I forget about these things. I'm like, we got to eat these things.
Right. You got to eat everything. Got to, try and incorporate all of it.
And then if you want to eat a bag of hot Cheetos afterwards, I ain't going to blame you. Trust me. Hot Cheetos is delicious.
Balance.
Balance, I'm still out here trying to live my happiest life, but definitely get the kale and the broccoli down first, and then if you got some room, eat your hot Cheetos, but don't go the other way.
Right. Don't fill up on those first.
Right. And then even then being able to try to get good water. That's like Mont Bello has a horrible sourcing of water. It's really highly contaminated in chlorine and things like that. But trying your best to get good clean water, get good clean air. As much as we're talking about the environment and everything, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the environmental racism that Commerce City's going through with that sunset factory literally polluting everyone's air. Let alone trying to get good food, good water. Literally, Commerce City has one of the most polluted zip codes in all of the United States.
Right. And, speaking on the environmental racism, that is a mostly Hispanic and Black neighbor. It's a very high population of those communities. And they're also putting a, interstate in there and doing a lot of road work around a lot of schools. And so it really shows you how people really feel and where these areas are being affected.
Yeah. And then bringing it back to the whole interconnectedness I think that's why I was drawn to environmental work, because environmental work and especially environmental racism tackles everything. If you look outside of the United States, most of the environmental activists are femmes and femme identified people. Most of them are Black or Indigenous. Most of them are poor and fighting against capitalism. Most of them are not Eurocentric at all. So if you actually support environmental liberation, especially against environmental racism, you are pretty much uplifting almost every single oppressed person, or a large swath of them globally.
Right.
Because it's the Amazon, it's different countries in Kenya, it's the Philippines, it's Borneo, it's Indonesia, it's all of these places where, the people who are being displaced and hurt are the people who we advocate the most in our woke conversations.
Yes. And, we have to make sure that we're lifting up those voices, because those are the people, like you said, who are experiencing it and being impacted by those things. And it's not enough for us to just be like, oh, I hear you. We also have to be like, I hear you. Now let's do something about it.
And even on the scientific point, these are the places that hold the swath of the most charismatic animals and places that we love. Right. Everyone loves sloths, everyone loves chimpanzees, koalas. And they love koalas, and they love all these things, and they love the pygmy hippos and all these wonderful animals. And I'm like, these are the places that are being affected the most by our capitalistic Western societies that are just corporate.
Right.
And then that whole thing about as much as you can, watch where your dollar goes. That's actually one of the best things you could do as an environmental activist, is watch where your dollar goes. And yes, you might have to pay a little bit extra for some shampoo or some soap or something, but if you can make sure that it's fair trade and that people aren't being exploited along the way, you're helping out. If you can make sure that it's sustainably sourced, you're helping out. If you can also make sure that it's animal or cruelty free, you're helping out. In these senses, you are putting money into most of the time corporations, or not corporations, but businesses that aren't corporations, because corporations don't really care about those ethics. Once you get to a certain level, they're like, nah, why? And usually the ones that do are fake. And if you do a little Google search to be like, who owns this? You're like, oh, you are not who I thought you were going to be. But being able to, if you can afford yourself 10 extra minutes to literally Google your products and be like, who are you connected to? Are you supporting a prison industrial complex? Are you supporting an unsustainable and really destructive corporation that is sourcing from the Amazon or Borneo or something and destroying the lands over there?
Right.
Are you is there another person who I can buy this from who yes, it might be $1 more expensive, but at least I'm supporting a Black business. At least I'm supporting an Indigenous business. Is there someone locally who you can get it from, who you're just like, Nevaeh, I heard you make soaps. Let me get some.
Right.
Right.
Building those helping build that community by doing those things. You're, connecting yourself and centering yourself, and you can center it into your cultures. Buying specifically Indigenous-owned brands that helps connect with your culture. Buying Black-owned brands. Buying people who look like you or have, ideals like you. It really helps. I think yourself feel better a lot of the time.
And like I think there's a luxury that we have to let go of, yes, and there's a struggle that we have to adopt with that, but it's because we are centralizing these things now against the capitalistic flow, right? And I
Right.
think there's a lot more push for that now, and I think there's a lot more of an understanding that that's the direction we all need to go into. Like my own family is starting to shift to the buying practices, so that's at least 6 more people who are added to that within the last couple months, you know.
Right.
And so if it's that droplet, then let's continue with the droplet until the bucket is full, and then we have an entire surplus of an economy and like a sector where we can buy fair trade, animal cruelty free, like hella different brands of Black and Indigenous owned and femme owned, like international, like self-made businesses that are not being bought out by like larger corporations, that they're just sustainable and at home mom and pop things. And you're just like, dope, like we've completely shifted the world.
Right. Like you said, just keep filling up that bucket until we have what we're wanting.
And again, all of this, like we've gotten to the level of the lofty dreams, but let us remember where this started. This started with like knowing yourself, knowing your culture, like using that as a reference point so that you can recognize other people's culture, you know, because again, if you don't know you, you won't know anyone else. Recognizing how some cultures have definitely taken the centerfold stage and just took over all the microphone and all the time.
Right.
And then recognizing how to not only take a step back, but also how to participate and ask questions, even if you mess up a little, but like of good heart, right? And learn and grow with everyone so that you can create these communities and stop supporting situations that are holding people back in oppressive systems.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that was a great place to end. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any questions? Anything else?
We covered everything and beyond.
Yeah, we could go a little extensive.
But I
Talk
think,
about
yeah, that's just how I am.
It's lovely. Well, thank you so much for being here and speaking with us and sharing your knowledge. It was wonderful, very informative. Your poems were beautiful, and I really am inspired by them. I'll probably be doing some writing soon. It's very lovely.
Well, I'm glad to be here with y'all. Thank y'all so much for having me. This is definitely, you know, I don't get to nerd out like this all the time where I have an hour and a half to, or like an hour and some to like really dive in. Most people are like, I'm done.
Right. We'll stick it out. I got you.
Thank you.
Well, it was lovely. I want to thank Kendra, our lovely ASL interpreter.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was Maya from Rainbow Summer Academy. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.